So hey,
Hi.
thank you for taking your time and being a part of Poly Role Model. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure thing. I'm Stella Harris. I am an author, a sex educator, and an intimacy coach.
Awesome, awesome. All right. Well, I'm gonna ask you some questions. Let's get started. How long have you been polyamorous, or how long have you been practicing polyamory?
So I have been poly on and off since I was 17 years old.
Okay.
That was when I was first introduced to the term by a partner that I had at that time. I got introduced to all kinds of things at that time: the kink community, the queer community, and the poly community all at once. I was even going to meetup groups in LA starting at 17.
Okay. And what does your relationship dynamic look like now?
Well, since those early days as a teenager, I haven't been poly nonstop since then. I did take a long detour into a monogamous marriage that then opened up towards the end of the marriage. That was open. And these days, I'm more or less solo poly,
Okay.
more by circumstance than by having specifically sought that out. But I have someone in Portland here that I'm in love with who I date, and I have a few other folks who I see on a regular or semi-regular basis.
Okay.
And then I have some other folks who I see when time and logistics allow.
Okay. All right. And what aspect of polyamory do you feel you excel at?
um, I'm really good at talking about things.
Okay.
I've always been a talker about just about everything. So I feel like I am fairly good at announcing how I'm feeling about things and talking through situations,
Okay.
especially the sexual safety piece of juggling multiple partners. On more than one occasion, I've been sort of the go-to person in various polycules that I've been in for like helping sort out how folks can have those conversations and what's going to work the best for everyone.
Makes sense. Makes sense. All right. And what aspect of polyamory do you feel you struggle with?
I mean, it's a little hard to differentiate a poly struggle from just a straight up relationship struggle.
Okay.
I can definitely find the scheduling a struggle,
Yeah.
in part because I am a very busy person who, I run my own business. I'm very busy. Most of the people I date are people who are very interesting and very busy.
Yeah.
And aligning schedules can be kind of a nightmare sometimes. And that often pushes on some of my personal buttons around like fear of scarcity, which happens to me not just in relationships, but even in business things. Like that's just a button I know that I have.
Yeah.
So that can become a problem for me sometimes with poly dynamics, is worrying about not getting enough time with people, which can spiral into all kinds of other related worries.
Okay. And so, what do you do to address or overcome those struggles?
Well, that's a work in progress. I have learned to simply tell people about it. I think that I think a lot of people get into trouble when we don't realize sort of the base of the problem of what's happening.
Okay.
So what I've sort of learned to do is pick apart what my feelings are. So, if someone tells me they're spending time with somebody else and my response isn't to be happy about it, I'm like, okay, there's something going on there. And
Yeah.
I kind of piece it apart. Like, is it that I don't like the other person or trust them for some reason? No, that's not it. Is it because I'm feeling insecure or not getting my needs met in some way?
Yeah.
And for me, that's usually what it is. So I guess it's sort of two things that I do. I try to be very clear with myself about what is the problem really? Where are the feelings actually coming from?
Okay.
And then sort of differentiating between something I need to work out on my own for myself and something that I need to talk to my partner about addressing with me. So with one partner, this was addressed pretty simply by just having a regular date night. with the understanding that we're both busy people, and honestly, about 25% of the time we had to reschedule it anyway.
Yeah.
But having a regular date night on the books helped me feel like we were both prioritizing spending time together. And that was really all it took, even though we'd already been seeing each other roughly once a week.
Yeah.
Knowing that it was scheduled helped me completely relax around that. So that has something that's worked for me.
That's pretty awesome. Now, in terms of risk-aware or safer sex, what do you and your partners do to protect one another?
Right. Well, definitely talking about all the things is the number one thing we do to protect each other and ourselves. For me personally, I have a safer sex talk with anybody that I'm going to do any kind of play that has associated risk. So because I do a lot of kink play, I do play with some folks in ways that I don't have a safer sex talk. So if I'm going to tie someone up in rope, we are having negotiations and safety talks, but I'm not necessarily asking their STI status, because their underwear or maybe even their pants aren't coming off. So there's lots of ways I engage with people that simply don't have those risks. Or a lot of play parties I go to, I'm either doing kink things or I'm often topping for things that involve toys or things that involve gloved hand sex.
Okay.
And so a lot of my sexual exploits actually have fairly minimal risk, which surprises people, because if you follow me on the internet and you hear me talking about sex parties all the time, it sounds like I would be exposed to a high degree of risk. But what I'm actually doing at those parties often is socializing and maybe making out and doing things like having gloved hand sex.
Gotcha.
So for folks that I am going to be more involved with, I always ask about testing history. My sort of loose guideline is I tend to want people I'm going to play with to have been tested within the last 6 months.
Okay.
But that also depends a little bit on what they've been up to since then.
Yeah.
So I ask people when they were last tested, and how many partners they've had since then, and what sort of conversations they had with those people, and what sort of barrier use they were using with those people.
Okay.
And I tend to find that how someone has that conversation is just as important as their actual answers. Because when I date out in the default world, like just on Tinder, I run into people who have clearly never had this conversation before.
Yeah, I know that type.
And that some people are like wide-eyed and into it and willing to be good sports, and for other people that just shuts everything down.
Yeah. Which also tells you something about them.
Absolutely. It's a great way to filter.
Yeah.
Because if people are not on top of sexual health and safety, if people aren't willing to talk about that, then it means I'm not going to be able to talk about other things that are important. If someone can't talk about their testing history, they're probably not going to be super comfortable with me giving them a detailed description of how I like to be touched, or giving me that information about themselves.
Yes.
It gives me a hint to how a lot of those conversations are going to go. So with all of my partners, we do all of these conversations, and then when we see each other again, we update. If anything has changed, if I've added a new partner, if a partner has added someone, if somebody had, a condom break or any sort of blips in the partner sphere, we also update about all of that sort of thing.
Okay. Now, what is the worst mistake you've ever made in your polyamorous history, and how did you rebound from that mistake?
My worst mistake? I don't even know what to choose. There have been a few things. Under-communicating expectations, I think, is a big one. And I think even though helping people figure out all of their expectations and talk about them is part of my job, I don't always do that perfectly when it's me.
Yeah.
And when things are changing, going too fast, that was a very big one for me when my marriage opened up. We'd been monogamous for a while, and then we opened up and sort of dove in head first. I had at that point been monogamous for about 8 or 9 years and was so ready to start dating again. I was right on the apps and out with somebody, the next day. And that, I think, was not very sensitive to my partner, who this was brand new to their feelings.
Yeah.
And that ended up in a night of no sleep and lots of tears and scaling back and trying again differently.
Yeah.
Yeah, and these days I think it's mostly time management and expectations piece. I think I have an anxiety disorder, and part of how I manage my anxiety is knowing what my plan is. And so I'm still sort of working out how to plan enough dates that I sort of get my social and sexual needs met without becoming completely overwhelmed or overextended, and figuring out that balance, because I have made that mistake in both directions. One, making dates for myself every single night of the week and being totally burned out.
Yeah.
And the other, turning everything down, for work. Recently, I was just, as I know you did as well, I just finished a book, and I turned down a lot of social plans to the point that I got really isolated, and that didn't feel amazing either. Yeah. So because I don't live with a partner, I don't have that incidental contact with somebody. I have to actually plan and schedule for that contact. And that is a constant sort of balancing act.
Fair enough. Great answer. So, what self-identities are important to you, and how do you feel like being polyamorous intersects with or affects those identities?
Sure. Well, I identify as both bisexual and queer.
Okay.
And that's another label I've had since I was 17. And that's an interesting one with poly or open relationships. On the one hand, it's kind of convenient because some of my play includes, threesomes and group sex, and liking all of the genders is kind of convenient for that.
Yeah.
And also, I am very aware of, certain stereotypes of, the bi-poly girl who is, the ideal unicorn, and wanting to make sure that just because I am that slutty bi girl, it doesn't make people think that everyone they run into who's poly is going to be into that. So that is important. And then the kink piece as well. I definitely identify as kinky. And I think there's a huge overlap there, at least in the kink communities that I've been involved with. There's a huge overlap with people who have some flavor of openness, whether or not they call it polyamory.
Yeah.
Which is really convenient, again, for kinks, because you can be involved with people who have very particular skill sets or particular interests. So, having one partner who's dominant, one partner who's submissive, because I also, within kink, I identify as a switch. This is kind of what it comes down to, is all of my identities is about me choosing all of the things with all of the people. So, being a switch and bisexual and polyamorous, I like to have a wide range of experiences. So for me, those all tie together because I get to do a lot of different things with a lot of different people.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. So, do you have any groups, projects, websites, blogs, etc. that you're involved with that you would like to promote?
Sure. Well, my main website is stellaharris.net.
Okay.
That is where you can find a lot of my writing, where you can find links to upcoming classes that I'm teaching, that sort of thing. I just started working as the sex columnist for a local paper here in Portland, the Willamette Week. Folks can find that on their website by searching for my name. And you can write in if you have sex questions. So I would love for more people to write in to the Willamette Week. It's askhumptown@wweek.com if you have questions. And my other big project is that I just finished writing a book about communication and negotiation for Cleus Press. And that will likely be available in September of 2018.
Awesome.
I'm working on the editing process now. But if you want to know when that is coming up, you can find me. If you search Stella Harris on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, sign up for my mailing list on my website, you will definitely see when that comes out and anything else I'm cooking up.
Awesome, awesome. I really appreciate you taking the time, and you. This is fantastic. Thank you so much for contributing to Poly Role Models.
My absolute pleasure.
All right.